Well, hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. On today's video, we're actually in the process of milling some 4x4s to be used at our camp, which is a whole different story. We'll get into that. But really the subject of this video is to answer a question about how do we calculate or how do we estimate and draw up what we need, our plans to know what we mill. Am I just coming down here and milling willy-nilly? Milling willy-nilly. That sounds funny, doesn't it? Well, to keep from wasting wood, of course, I want to have a plan. So before I even put a log on the mill, I have a plan as to what I want out of it and trying to get the most yield and, of course, not waste the resources. You guys going to make it or what? Yeah, you need to let the other guy know when you're going to drop it. Well, before I mill, I could obviously sit down and calculate all the material I need and write it on a piece of paper. I do that sometimes. If it's just a small project, doesn't need a lot of effort put into it. But what I really like to use is a piece of software that's free. It's a piece of software that was actually created by Google back in the day called SketchUp. And they've since then divested of it. I think they've sold it to another company. Now it's all cloud-based. And you can come on in, buddy. And it's actually a pretty interesting piece of software. It's basically like a mini CAD or a CAD 101 concept, drawing in vectors and paths. We can come up with 3D modeling, all that type of stuff. It's free, like I said, cloud-based. I've used it in the past. I've used it for years, probably 10, 15 years. When I was doing woodworking, I designed my woodworking projects in it, get my materials list, get my cut sheet, all of that from that. And now I'm using it to design things that we're building, the barn, the camp, the outhouse, all those type of stuff. So let's step inside and take a look at that real quick. Well, okay, so forget going inside. It's too nice an evening, and it's quieter out here than it is inside right now. Kelly and the boys are watching something. So I'm not going to turn this into a software tutorial or anything like that, and I am going to try to thread the needle to explain what this has anything to do with homesteading and farming elements there. So as I'd mentioned down at the mill, that I've used this software for quite a few years, and that's why I have two computers here. Simply because this old Dell computer I have is running the software natively. Back when Google owned it, you could actually download the software and install it on your device and use it that way, so you wouldn't have to be connected to the internet. With the Mac, you can't, since Google has now sold the rights to SketchUp, you now have to use it on the cloud unless you want to purchase it and do all that type of stuff. Both of these were free. The way I use it still is free. I have not paid for SketchUp. So it's pretty handy. And again, being free allows you to not invest a bunch of money into it. So I just want to show you a couple things as to why you should consider using it. So as I mentioned, when I first started using this software many, many years ago, I've probably been using it about 10 years now. It was downloadable and obviously installed on this Dell PC. That's why I apologize for shooting a video of the screen, but I don't have screen capture on this Dell opportunities. But back in the day, I used this software for my woodworking business. When I was making a lot of furniture and things for people, custom builds. Here's an example of a toy chest I made for a client that I was able to design based upon the parameters he gave me. Hey, I need a chest roughly that'll fit in this area by this height. I need these safety features on it because it's for my daughter, yada, yada, yada. And so what I was able to do is go in and design it. So in designing this, it helps me with my build, so I can get an idea of just exactly how big each panel is. When I'm taking my raw material, my lumber that I had milled, that had dried and was ready to go in the workshop, then I knew when I was going to plane it, okay, what material do we need to start with as far as width and quality goes. So I could start measuring off these things using these tools here and say, okay, I know the stiles and rails that I need to build this toy chest need to be 2 inches and 3/4 wide. So that's when I would start putting my material list together. I knew that's what I needed to get. This design process also allowed me to colorize this so I could show this to my client as a proof to say, hey, here's what I plan on building for you. This will be a mix of maple and cherry is actually what we built out of. And I can show the client, say, here's what I'm thinking, here's the design style, here's even some tonal properties that'll give you an idea what the wood quality is going to look like. And the reason why there's a little person standing behind there, SketchUp throws it in to give you scale. So it helps somebody determine the scale of what's being built there. So as you can see, this was a simple build. One thing I didn't show was an inlay. I did an inlay on top of an E for their daughter. Her name started with an E. So that's why we did that. So that's very helpful. It not only allows me to design and get an idea of exactly what I need to build, but then of course allowed me to proof for my clients. Did some other woodworking. I won't spend too much time on that, but here was another entertainment cabinet that I built for a guy. This was solid cherry. In fact, this is kind of cool. Not necessarily homesteading related, so you guys may be bailing out on me, but this cabinet was built completely out of cherry wood, and it was actually cherry that I cut down from this guy's yard. He had a cherry tree uproot in his yard, and he's like, man, it was a really nice cherry tree. I hate to just throw it away. Can we do something with it? I said, yeah, I'll come get it. We milled it up. We put it in the kiln at the time. The kiln's over at my brother's house, and kiln dried it. Took it out of the kiln, and I designed this cabinet for him and built it. And it was a really neat thing. It's what I kind of call cradle to the grave type process. We took it from a tree in the yard to a piece of furniture sitting in his house. So I was able to design this and show him, okay, here's what we're going to build. Here's how we're going to do the legs. Here's how we're going to do all these components. And even could show him, hey, I'm going to put mesh screens in the back so you can have some airflow for your AV equipment. There's a cable chase in the back, of course, so you don't have cables laying all over the place. So this turned out to be a really slick build. It turned out really well. Had a really nice patina to it, and I've actually seen it here recently. It still looks pretty sharp, if I do say so myself. So that was probably 8 years ago. One other benefit when it comes to building specific components like this, so if you decide to use this software and you're going to build something, let's say you're going to build some beehives, you're going to build a bookcase, you're going to build whatever you want for your homestead, you can use this software to not only design, but you can help it with your material list and your cut strategy when you're cutting material out, if you're using manufactured material or sheet material. So look at this example here of this gun cabinet I built for a guy. So he wanted his specific requirements. He had an office in the third floor of his house that had the gabled roof. So it was kind of like an attic space that was built out. So it had these knee walls that were a certain height, and then the roof slanted towards the center. So he wanted the gun cabinet to go against one of those walls, so it couldn't be too high that it would hit the slope of the roof, but obviously it needs to be tall enough to put his rifles and his shotguns in. So fortunately he wasn't a musket guy, so we didn't have these huge rifles. We just had some basic hunting rifles and shotguns. So I built this, designed this cabinet for him. I don't even remember how tall it was. Let's see here real quick. I think it ended up being, 5 feet. So he probably had I think it was a 5.5 foot knee wall. We wanted to come in just under that. So designed these cabinets, nice glass door, of course, so he could see his guns on display. But the point in showing you this is when it was time to pull the trigger on it, or actually even before that, when it was time to quote my material, because of course in building a cabinet like this, it was all sheet goods. It was all veneer plywood, majority of it. So I used the software to help me lay out the panels that I need to build. So here's my two main sides, here's the short sides, and then here's the shelf faces and all those type of things. So I could get an idea, okay, well I need this many pieces, so how many pieces of plywood do I need? But then not only could I use that to estimate the material I need, but when it was time to cut, I could print this off, take it down to the table saw, stick it on there in a magnet, and it'd give me a cut strategy. So in this example, starting with this first sheet of plywood, I'm going to do my horizontal cuts first. So I would do some cutting sideways using my plywood table saw, my cabinet saw. Goodness, I cannot talk. Using my cabinet saw, do my horizontal cuts. I knew when to put a cutting blade instead of a ripping blade on it there for my veneer. And then, of course, turn and get my rip cuts out with the grain of the plywood and get the material. And then the second plywood sheet, all the pieces that I needed, and knew that I'd have half a sheet of scrap left over. So it was really handy to help me not only design, get an idea of what materials I needed, but then also help me with a cut strategy. Okay, so let's talk actual application of homesteading stuff. So you guys, if you followed the channel for a while, you have seen my barn, and it's still not complete. But when I started that project a while back, I used the software to give me an idea of how big a barn can I build, can I afford to build, how am I going to make it marry up to my workshop. I wanted to connect to my workshop. I didn't want to be two separate structures. So I needed to have some design there. So I came to the software and designed this using, so you can see this back area here is kind of a rude drawing, crude drawing of my workshop. But then I knew my distances there, so now I could start laying out. And I wanted an old style barn with center loft, all those type of things. So I could figure out exactly what my distances were, what my spans were going to be, and then I could start figuring out my material. So I knew in this design I needed 16 4x6s to do the main substructure or the superstructure of the barn, and then could even figure out my floor joists, how many I need, the 4x4 post for the loft, which I actually changed that. So when I actually went to build it, I didn't do 4x4s. I actually studded this out up here. Just decided to change it for some reason. But it'd give me an idea of my, not only my cut list, figuring out what I needed. So it was time to go down to the mill, which I milled all of this material. It was time to go to the mill to say, okay, I've got X amount of logs. I need 16 4x6s. So it helped me look at my logs and determine what yield I could get from each log, and of course keep me from wasting material. Or once I got to a certain spot on a squared log and say, well, I can get 4 4x6s out of that, but I'm going to have some waste on top. Let's go ahead, and I know I need a couple floor joists, so I can get 2 floor joists out of that. So allowed me to have my material list, take it with me to the mill, and use that to maximize the production of my log. Okay, so now to the fun stuff. So we'll switch over to the Mac, which I now have. This is cloud-based, of course, so it allows me, and I can also do screen capture here, so the quality will be a little better. But we'll get to looking at what we're working on right now when it comes to our off-grid project up at camp, and then how we can even use it here on the homestead. So if we look here, this is a file that I've called Johnny House, which is our off-grid vermicomposting toilet, and we'll talk about that on down the road. But at the time of recording this video, my truck is sitting right there, but my truck is loaded with material. We're going to leave first thing in the morning, going to run up to camp and just spend a day up there. We'll actually come back tomorrow night. I'm going to spend a day up there getting our posts set in the ground for our structure to be built on. So we're going to put it in the ground, obviously set our concrete piers, do all that type of stuff. So that'll be cured. So when we come back the following weekend, over the holiday weekend, then we're going to build hopefully a good bit of this, and we'll document that as well. So you can see here with this software, very similar, a little bit of a different layout. Again, what I had on this machine and what I have on the Mac, this was I think 2013 version. So this is obviously 6 years difference. So you can see a very similar design process. The lady's a little different. She's now on a phone, so she's either calling her friends and saying this is an incredible design that Troy's come up with, or she's calling the health department. So we'll see. But it allows me in this situation, designing this Johnny house, I need elevation simply because we've got our vermicomposting tank will be back here in the ground area, and again we'll document that. So I have to have some elevation, so I got to figure out, of course, how this is all going to be built and supported and all those type of things. So in this situation, what's awesome here is since we're going up to camp tomorrow and we'll be off grid, obviously I can't really take my computer and access the cloud. So this evening I'm going to take different screenshots of this or do different printouts. So I'll be able to have that information. Again, tomorrow all we're going to do is go up and set the piers, so I can just sit down here with my view and be able to get an idea of my distance and those type of things. So that's what's really neat about this software. Once I've got it designed and put together, then I can even take my tape measure here and say, okay, how far apart did I want this 4x6 from this other 4x6? Well, the outside corners are going to be 3 feet 9 inches. So I can highlight that, I can label that, as you saw on some of my old woodworking stuff. So is this software hard to use? No, it's really not. If you want to use it, the easiest thing to do is just Google SketchUp. Just all one word. Just type that into Google and you'll see this information pop up. So this company that owns it now, you will, I think it's called Trimble. You do have to have a Trimble account, but it's free. Now granted, it puts you on their email list and all that type of stuff. But it's free to use their software. And you even have server space. So like right now, Johnny House is saved on their server. I can download a file. I can export different files for use if I need to. So it, while being cloud-based, has the benefits. Sometimes it's not as clean for the things I want to use, but you have the ability to access that. So you just go there, set up your account, and you can start using this. As far as learning goes, there are tutorials that you can watch that show you how to use it pretty easily. But it's pretty intuitive. There's really a lot of robust tools for this, but the majority of what I use it for, I'm just scratching the surface. I mean, I'm using the 3D tool, using some box tools. Extrude Tool is probably the biggest thing. Like if I'm going to build, let's say I'm going to build a let's say we're going to build a 6x6 post right here. So I just take the rectangle tool and draw it on the ground, and so it highlights it, and I can put in 6x6. I'm literally typing that in on my keyboard. I hit my extrusion tool, come over here and click that arrow and drag that thing up and say, well, that needs to be an 8-foot, so that's 96 inches. That needs to be an 8-foot 6x6. You can see that thing just created an 8-foot 6x6. And then if I want to move it around, I'm going to use my arrow tool and highlight the whole thing. And I can even make that a component so all of those plot points stay together and say this will always be this 8-foot long 6x6 post, and I can call it as such and move it around. Or if I think, well, I really don't need to make components of that, I just need to move this one. So I can come over here and I can grab this corner, and let's say I want to put this 6x6, let's say I want to do some crazy flagpole for some stupid reason. I want to put it on the front corner of the deck of the Johnny House, this little corner I'm highlighting here. Well, I can just come over and grab this corner, just one click, and drag it over to that corner. Sound effects is me, it's not the machine. And voila, there you go. So now we've got this 6x6 odd looking post on the front corner of the Johnny House. So that's how I build everything. I basically build these components on the ground, move them over in place, set them up, and again, make sure scale. This will be completely 100% accurate to scale and distance and length as long as you've built it correctly. If you've made the 6x6 by 8-foot post 98 inches instead of 96, then that's on you, not on the software. Garbage in, garbage out, as they say in programming. So, yeah, pretty intuitive. It's a pretty handy piece of software. I strongly recommend using it. I mean, if you're going to build, if you're building anything, if you're building a chicken coop, if you're building a hoop house, if you're building anything off-grid like we're doing, build a little cabin, building a barn, building any of that, this can really help you figure out your materials. And again, you can obviously sit down with a pencil and paper and a ruler and go at it. That's fine. That's what we used to do before computers, of course. But this tool is really handy to have. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. One other thing I'll show you, and again, if I've lost most of the people here, then I'm sorry, but this may not be as interesting to everybody. So another project we have up at camp is our deck, and we've detailed that in previous videos where we built a deck so we could have our tent. Well, we'd like to, at some point, this deck will become the back porch of our off-grid cabin that we're going to build there. We don't want to just build a deck and throw it away and start over, so we want to try to build something that had value. So here I've designed the deck in SketchUp so I can start factoring in how I want to put a roof on it, put a single-angled roof. That would be a typical back porch. And there's that lady again remarking, hey Troy, that's an incredible deck that you have there. Or again, she's calling the building code inspector. So, but you can see here the reason why something as simple as how would you build a roof, putting that in SketchUp, the reason why I did that is so I could get an idea of my joinery. I want to play around. I'm by no means a timber frame guy. I love it. I'd love to learn it and know more of it. But being a woodworker, I know about how to make a lot of these joints. I've just never made it on the scale that you'd have for timber framing. So I want to incorporate some of that into these roof joints. So putting it in SketchUp to me is the most simple way of figuring out exactly how I'm going to build that. So you can see here where I've got, these are all 4x4 posts. So these 4x4s, these horizontal 4x4s meet on this center post. we're going to do 2 half laps. So we'll do a half lap joint, the lay down right there, and it gives me an idea of how to build that. Same with my my back corners here. My connectivity is a little slow, so it's not updating here as fast as you can see. The same thing here. We're going to do half lap joints, and those joints are going to half lap at, of course, a 90-degree angle. And then, of course, we'll drive pins down through the top. We'll do dowel rods. When it comes time to having these side horizontals tying in the front and the back, this would be technically where the lady is standing is the front of the deck, or the ground side. The hillside falls away behind it, so our roof angle will go with the slope of the land. And obviously we'll do some nice rain catchment off the back of that, because that's going to be a 12 by 20 metal roof there, so we'll had a lot of square footage there to catch some rain. But where this horizontal is going to tie the back into the front, we're going to have it butting into the front post instead of putting it at an angle, because my actual rafters with my purlins to hold the metal roofing, I haven't put those in the design yet. I want to do some mortise and tenon. So looking at, okay, how do I want to lay that out? Do I actually want to try to do a loose mortise? Do I want to do a fixed mortise? Do I want to try to do a dovetail? It'll be kind of cool to play around with some different options there. So this helps me visualize that. I do much better in building things if I can see it first and try to mimic it versus just trying to draw it out of my mind, and this really helps. So you can see how that software could be pretty handy in helping you design your projects, figuring out exactly what materials you need, figuring out the lengths, your cut lists, all those type of things. And like I said, it helps me come down and calculate so I'm not wasting wood. Right here with these 4x4s that I'm needing for our deck porch, our posts, then I know, okay, I need exactly this number, and I need them to be exactly this long. And so when I'm milling, I can keep note of that. And if I've got some that are not as good, have some issues with them, then I can say, well, okay, I know I needed a short one here because of my design. So maybe I can still have an 11-footer that's got some bad wane or a rotten spot or something, but I know I only need 5 feet of that, or whatever the case may be. So it really helps me maximize my logs. Now this is twice, 2 videos. If you guys follow our channel sequentially, this is twice now that I've mentioned our vermicomposting toilet that we're designing without really explaining it. But I will get into detail on that on our next video. We'll go step by step, actually explain what it is, how we're going to build it, how we're going to utilize it, and also give you a lot of references, because this isn't my design as far as the vermicomposting system. This is a design that's been used for quite a while. So I'll give you a lot of resources to look at. I think by far this is the best off-grid toilet system out there. Beats composting toilet, beats septic system, beats all that hands down. Now, obviously, I haven't used one yet. I've just seen the research on it, so we'll see. Well, the proof will be in the tank, I guess. We'll leave that right where it is. All right, take care, everybody.